Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome. We are your hosts, Josefa Kapadia and Jasper Rivers.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. Today, Jasper is unavailable to make it, but I am here, and we've got an amazing guest today. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Urban Flat. And what they basically do is they provide an alternative experience to hotels, and one of the ways they do that is through Airbnb. So we're very excited to have Evan Haskell. Evan, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you before we jump into your company, it's doing really exciting things, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a local Angelino, born and raised in Los Angeles. I went to USC, and I've always had sort of a passion for a couple of things, business being one, but also real estate. And post-graduation, I started working in private equity, and I realized that, the corporate world just wasn't really for me. I always wanted to kind of get out and do my own thing, and, I was always pretty good at, finding the opportunities. And one of my business partners about 2.5 years ago put me onto Airbnb, and we were Airbnb-ing an apartment actually right in downtown LA, and we were doing really well with it. The building basically ended up finding out about our activity there, and they weren't too happy about it, but I think that was sort of when we realized that there was a major opportunity and a really high demand, which is sort of when we went in and came up with the business plan for Urban Flat.
I see. And so how long were you able to successfully have that listing in downtown LA?
That listing was up for about 2 months, which is interesting. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how the building found out about the activity, but, per the terms in the lease agreement regarding subleasing, they might have found us on Airbnb, someone might have tipped them off, I'm not exactly sure. But we were forced to take the listing down, which left us with a pretty big liability in our hands because we actually weren't living in the apartment at the time. We were just solely renting it out.
I see. Okay, so then this gave you an idea for a company for Urban Flats, and what was your next step? How did you start to design what you guys have now?
Yeah, I mean, to take it back, I've always traveled by using vacation rentals. Anytime that I would go up to, for example, Mammoth to go to the snow, my friends and I, we would rent a vacation rental. Usually it was a house or, a couple-bedroom condo. And I realized that, you could never really, you never really knew what to expect when you would arrive. Sometimes the place was clean and sometimes it was just disgusting. And I realized from my experience, using Airbnb, on that first unit that people really enjoy, and mind you, like this room was bare. I mean, we had a couch, we had a bed, and that was about it. There was really nothing, there was no character to the room. It was just, we rented it, we put a few things in there, and, to give you some statistics, we were spending around $2,500 a month. So it was a pretty significantly sized, one-bedroom loft. And on the income side, we were pulling in around $6,000 to $7,000 a month. So, this was the type of place that would sleep 8 people, So we were doing extremely well with it, which is interesting. But, basically what happened after that, once we got evicted, was we went ahead and we purchased units in the building next door. So now we were running a true mini Airbnb, operation, really focused on travelers coming in for 1 to 4 days, which we found to be the optimal range for, this was a pure business money-making opportunity for us at the time. It was, nothing more than that. And so we were Airbnb-ing about 3 to 4 apartments at once. And what I found, and this is interesting because all of those rooms were different. I think at the time, I had one room that was the LA room, and it was Hollywood themed with pictures of Kobe Bryant and the Chili Peppers and Marilyn Monroe. And it was just to bring travelers, into LA and make them really feel like, wow, this is a really cool city. Yet the room next door that we had furnished ourselves was completely different, and it had, a contemporary look and, interesting artwork on the wall that we probably just bought from Home Goods or something like that. And what I realized is that we had a real opportunity here based on the demand to really brand ourselves and create a line just like a hotel would. If you're, to walk into any Ritz-Carlton all around the world, I mean, for the most part, the rooms themselves, it might depend on sort of geographic location, but they use a lot of the same suppliers, and you can walk in and you know what makes it a Ritz. And I said to myself, wow, people love this. We can go ahead and brand rooms, and whether you walk into building A or building B, I want people to be able to walk into a room and know that it's Urban Flat. And that's sort of where the idea all started.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, and even, you'll find this with a lot of hotel chains, like the Shangri-La, for example. They have a signature smell in the lobby right when you come in to sort of let you know that it's one of their establishments. So that's really clever. So, it sounds like you've probably done a lot of market research as far as what types of things seem to attract guests when you're setting up these rooms. So what kind of advice do you have for hosts out there who are trying this for the first time as far as really making an inviting space?
Yeah, well, I think, the beauty of Airbnb is that it allows for a host, to really, especially like, for example, right before you get your photos taken. That's sort of the time where, hosts try to furnish the room a little bit differently, maybe add some artwork to the wall, but it really is an expression of oneself. And, when you're talking about being a host to people from all around the world, which I think is one of the most rewarding, parts of what I do. I've met so many interesting people from so many different, regions of the world. But, some recommendations, I guess, to some of the first-time hosts are, really make sure that you invest in your space. And that comes down to providing the little things which are, relatively inexpensive. Like, for example, a coffee maker. Everyone, for the most part, when they're traveling, sometimes they're tired and, they would love to just make their coffee in the morning. And having that little luxury, which might cost you around $20 on Amazon, goes a long way. Furthermore, I look at the little things because it's all about experience. If you think about most of the time when people are using Airbnb, this is a place for them to come home, to feel comfortable, to feel at home, and really to go to sleep and be out the next day exploring. So when you talk about little things, I'm referring to, for example, the shower head. One of the first things that we did in some of our first flats was replace all of the shower heads because the ones that we were using, or that essentially the building had, which was out of our control, was just kind of a piece of crap, like there was no water pressure or anything. And I knew that, people are going to definitely want to feel good when they take a shower and feel refreshed and go out and start their day. So that was one of the, first investments that we made. I think a comfortable bed and clean sheets. Cleanliness is so key because, when you go to a hotel, they have standards, and cleanliness is usually at the top of their list, depending on the hotel that you're staying at. But, making sure that your room is just clean and inviting is something that I think guests will really appreciate. And, it's really just, thinking about the minute, basic, and simple concepts that really make a big difference. It's the little things.
And so when you're talking about cleanliness, now we talk a lot about this in our book, Get Paid for Your Pad. We have a whole section dedicated to cleanliness, but do you guys hire a professional service or a team of professionals, or how do you manage the cleaning process?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, some statistics about our company. I mean, when we first started about 2 years ago, it really just started with one unit, and we were able to scale up to about three. And, that's when we were able to sort of prove our concept, raise funding. And fast forward today, I mean, we've completely pivoted our business model. We still do leverage Airbnb, but I'm sure that we'll get into that, later on in the conversation. But we're at about the 30 unit mark throughout Southern California as well as Northern California. So we've experimented. It all started actually with my own housekeeper that, my parents used, once every few weeks when I was growing up. And I said, hey, you want to earn some extra cash on the side? And so she was really the first one. And as we've grown larger, we've definitely tested out services, that have really popped up in the space relating to cleaning. And it's challenging. It's challenging because when you talk about branding in general, it's important that, things are done consistently throughout all of units. And I say units, but what I really should be saying is flats, branding 101. But with our flats, it's difficult to use a company that's just going to send a new housekeeper every time because they don't exactly know the way that things are supposed to be. I mean, when you compare a professional brand to a regular Airbnb host, there's definitely some differences in terms of how the unit is cleaned, but I think the overall concept is the same. I mean, we fold our beds differently. We place various materials in the room, whether it's shampoo, and we want things done a certain way. So those companies, it's difficult to use them. I don't think that they're necessarily at a point where they can manage even really the demand. So we've actually opted to hire all of our housekeeping staff in-house. And that's worked out pretty well for us.
I see. Okay, so you mentioned Airbnb and how it's used in your business. I'd love to dive into that. So how exactly, do you use other services or is it primarily Airbnb at this time?
So our business has actually taken a couple of pivots since the start. I mean, when we did first start, like I mentioned, our rooms were extremely bare. They really... they had just a bed and a couch and, maybe a TV that didn't even have cable, but we would provide, for example, a Roku player. And, what's happened with the Airbnb market is interesting too. There was a point where the supply was so low and the demand was so high that we could charge $3.99 a night. So it was pretty amazing. And, it wasn't, for us, it wasn't necessarily all about money. I mean, we still enjoyed, meeting our guests. But we realized that there were so many people coming in, and it is almost hard to meet all these people. I mean, you need to have a personal life as well. So, what we started to do is build a seamless check-in process where people would, essentially grab their keys from a lockbox, and we would be there in contact with them via email or, text or whatever other form of communication. But I think in terms of at the time, we were able to leverage solely Airbnb because of that demand. And, as time's gone on, I mean, when you build up an operation of units, whether it's, 2 or more, you can't be solely reliant on just one platform. And interestingly enough, I can only speak for Airbnb and what they've done to sort of change the market for vacation rentals, because they've also tapped into obviously business travelers. Their demographics are changing, and companies are actually starting to look on Airbnb for alternative experiences to hotels, whether it be a house or a condo or an apartment. So we have experimented with a few others, but a lot of what we've done nowadays is our rooms are furnished exceptionally, down to the Bluetooth, speaker system in the room. They're really just decked out, and they're amazing places for, primarily business people or, athletes, people that are in between homes, people even here for vacation. We really focus on sort of the mid-market. So that means from 15 days all the way up to a few months at a time. And we sort of aligned ourselves now with a more corporate housing company as opposed to, a company that's really just focused on 1 to 5 day rentals. Which, look, I mean, markets are changing. There's a huge opportunity there if somebody can capture that. It's just not where we sort of have aligned ourselves in the market. So, in terms of other platforms or other demand channels, a lot of that just comes down to relationships. And in this day and age where the supply is a lot higher on Airbnb and demand is lower, in order to essentially survive, you need to have these other outlets for demand.
I see. Okay, so so I understand you've now pivoted, but with respect to the use that you do have using the Airbnb platform currently, what are some of the things that seem to function well with your current business model, having 30 units, etc.?
Specifically relating to Airbnb?
Yeah, specifically relating to Airbnb.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right now, all of our apartments can be found on Airbnb. Some of them have minimum night stays, and a lot of times that's, subject to building and city policy. But what's been, most important for us in terms of Airbnb, when looking at the amount of units as we have, is it's really the social proof that comes with having so many reviews. And I think, to any guest, to any host, one of the most important things at the end of the day that they can do to attract customer number 2 or, guest number 2, should I say, is focus on getting a good review. And I think that there's a fine line, when doing that. Sometimes people can try a little bit too hard. But I think if you go back and you based on what we were talking about in the beginning of our conversation, and you really provide an environment where, these guests can feel at home and you're not overly trying to push for them to write a good review, I think that they will. And that's where it's extremely important. I mean, we have close to, I think, 500 reviews on Airbnb at this point. So we've worked really hard to do that. And the reviews kind of speak for themselves and are a testament to, the experience that we've created for our guests when they come into town. So from that regard, using Airbnb to get clients is great. We've definitely seen demand go down over time, but at the same time, it's a platform that we want to continue to grow with and align ourselves with, because it's where people are looking nowadays, and Airbnb is not going anywhere. I mean, there's a reason that companies like, other platforms, Expedia and Kayak, Hotels.com, have not mastered the niche for apartments. It's difficult. And I think Airbnb is really solidifying its place in that space.
Absolutely. So now we've spoken to a number of people on our show who have larger operations, and from time to time we've heard that there are various difficulties. For example, we had a guest, he runs a company called Apartment Medellin in Colombia. They have, I think, like 40 or 50 units for rent there. One thing that they mentioned is, for example, when they're trying to create a guidebook through the system, what they wanted to do is, since all the units are located in the same vicinity, they wanted to apply the same guidebook to each listing, but there was no such feature or function. As you've been going through and developing your business, has there been anything that you found on the platform that that works really well for individual listings, but not so great when you have 30 listings like you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think one thing is really just the calendar. The calendar is the, database for all people coming in and out. It's the database, how we know what units need to be cleaned. And Airbnb has a platform that was really built for the individual to rent out, their own space or rent out their couch or their spare room. So, of course, Airbnb is well funded, but they can only really move so fast. So it's not exactly a platform that is optimized for larger companies, which is probably why, some of the larger, even corporate housing companies have not moved their units onto Airbnb, which, the way that I see it, Airbnb has really created a platform. It's created a platform similar to how, when eBay started, there was, small sellers that grew larger and really focused their attention on building their business on the platform. And I think Airbnb has done the same. And it's important for anyone that's, thinking about kind of getting into the Airbnb market of more than 2 units, which statistically speaking, I mean, there's been a huge increase in the amount of people that are taking this risk and taking on, another unit that they don't actually live in, which is interesting. And I think Airbnb knows that. And if Airbnb continues to build and optimize for people that have more than one listing, and even for some of the people like you mentioned that have even 50 listings, I think, the calendar is where it all starts. And it's in no position right now to cater to the needs of a larger company. Airbnb, I believe, should also have a search feature within messages. I mean, if I remember somebody's name, or if I remember, a point in the conversation, I mean, Airbnb doesn't even have a search bar. So, as advanced as they seem and as large of a company as they are, I mean, they still have their kinks to work out. Some of them are, probably pretty simple. And, I've seen growth and I've seen change on the Airbnb platform since I've started. So there's only so much that we can kind of do, but patiently wait. And I think it'll mutually benefit both the companies that place their units on Airbnb and then obviously Airbnb themselves.
One other question related to the use of Airbnb with respect to a larger company. What about dynamic pricing? Because I know as well, the same issue with Apartment Medellin, they found it difficult to monitor and change based on holidays, conferences, things like that, even season or day of the week. How do you guys handle, changing prices to match demand?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first and foremost, our business model is not, we're not a profit-driven business model. And what I mean by that is, we've had listings that were in buildings that we were doing extremely well with in terms of margin, and our customers were happy, and that's great. And a lot of people would say, okay, well, why ever leave the building? The building itself, which I can't name here, they don't take care of the building. I mean, it's dirty. And it really just comes down to standard, because at the end of the day, the building's 95% occupied. So not everyone agrees with us. But, when you're talking about Urban Flat as a brand and the standards that we have, we are subject to the way that buildings essentially manage themselves. So we, had about 10 listings in this one specific building, and we essentially took them all out because everything down to the carpets on the floor that would get dirty and the way that the whole building was managed, we pulled it out. Which sort of speaks to the idea which we are more about creating an exceptional housing experience for our guests. And we want them to say, hey, I tried Airbnb once, this was amazing, and I'm only going to come back through this platform to do so. So refresh me on what the original question was.
Well, the main thing is, so when you're pricing your unit,
right,
depending, right, yeah.
Okay. So where I'm going with that is that in respect to pricing, they're right. It's extremely difficult. But my segue is that our pricing is based around what we believe our units are worth. I think that given that we're in a market where we're competing with people who can, really price whatever they want, not everyone has the same intentions to really run a business. Or, most people, it's great to make a little bit of money on the side, but, we think that our units are honestly worth more. I mean, I would pay more for an Urban Flat unit than what you can find it for on Airbnb, which, average price is probably around $199 to $229 a night, somewhere in that range. So we're definitely representing the upper end of the market, but I think that it still is a really great value. Pricing is tough. I mean, when you look at companies like larger hotels that have access to databases which change pricing in a matter of minutes based on supply and demand, I mean, that's a luxury that they have to really optimize the business. And, I know a few companies that are out there that are really trying to capture the space. Given the amount of data that Airbnb has, I mean, if it was a feature that they could release, I'm sure that they will, or that they would. But I know that that's definitely a major need point, and it would help in our business and really just with anyone that's trying to Airbnb. Because advice that I give to people that are starting sort of with Airbnb, you know, with their first unit is test your price. I mean, a lot of times the first question I ask is, well, what are you going to put your 1-bedroom apartment on Airbnb for? And they go, oh, well, $99. And I'm like, well, how do you know that it's not going to sell for $199? You could make the same amount of income, you know, with essentially less guests that are coming in, if you were to just, you know, price higher. So a lot of our pricing right now has been determined through extensive testing, you know, and that's where we're at. If we had the ability to leverage a software, we probably would take advantage of it. But at this point, it's just based on, you know, testing and what we believe is a good value. I mean, we will not, one of the things that we will not do is, you know, if we have a room that's priced for $199, we're not going to just drop it to, you know, $99 a night just to fill it. I mean, we have certain standards, and it doesn't make sense at some point to drop so much. And on the flip side, I mean, there are definitely times during the year, for example, in Los Angeles, I mean, it's the E3 convention, which is, you know, mid-June. We've had experiences, and we've actually been able to achieve margins of, you know, in upwards of 200%. I mean, we've charged $600 a night for, you know, a 1-bedroom apartment, and that's really, you know, prime time. And this is actually, it's guest driven. I mean, people will come to us and say, hey, we have a budget of $500 a night for these dates. You know, the company's probably going to pay for it. And that's when, you know, as a host, you say, wow, I mean, there's some huge demand here. So I think just paying attention to some of the trends, you know, a lot of people will try and book for events that are, you know, far out. And then you notice maybe 4 months out, and you'll notice that there's traction with a lot of people trying to book the same events. I mean, that's where strategically, you know, if you wanted to, you can bump pricing up a little bit. But, you know, that's the way that I look at it.
Sure. All right, let's talk about a little bit. It's an issue that a lot of hosts encounter, and I know you've probably dealt with this as well. We talk to people in various cities, and of course, issues arise as far as, let's say you're in a condo and you have a condo association that is opposed to Airbnb, or a landlord that doesn't want you subleasing the unit on a short stay basis, things like that. How does your company handle these types of issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one is just pure transparency. There's no reason, especially when there's so much risk on the table, if you're you know, whether you're buying or renting, to go and list your unit on Airbnb and not disclose it to your building, because 9 out of 10 times, you know, something's going to happen, and, you know, a neighbor's going to meet the guest. I mean, I was just in my lobby earlier this morning at my building, and the guard was telling me that some guy came down and he was demanding a parking pass, and he showed him his receipt for $1,000 over 5 days. And I was thinking to myself, oh, okay, well, someone just, you know, putting their unit on Airbnb, and that's actually exactly what it was. So I live in a condo, and we have an HOA, and our company actually has apartments within this building, but you know, we definitely obey those rules, and that rule that the HOA has created is that stays in this building can only be for 30 days or more. So it's just the way that we, you know, need to operate here. And I think that there's a, you know, the transparency at the end of the day is just key. You know, letting your building know sort of what your intent is and what you're doing, and if they're okay with that, then that's great. And if they're not, I mean, it's probably just not worth the risk of, you know, an eviction. But I think that that's sort of just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we spend a lot of money on premiums for insurance. And I think this is something that, sure, you know, Airbnb provides a $1 million insurance policy, which is amazing. It's not something that they've done since their existence. And it just shows that they're really looking out for their guests. I don't know how many, you know, lawsuits have come out, but it's definitely an important issue for any business to be well insured. And that's something that we also take into account. Every unit that we open is insured, more than just basic homeowners insurance. It's, you know, really just for the unexpected, which is important. And there's a lot of, you know, people on Airbnb that don't take the extra step to get their own insurance, which it's an at your own risk type of move. Lastly, it's permits. So, every city has its own specific regulations regarding short-term rentals, specifically for less than 30 days. Usually, from my understanding, if it's over 30 days, then you should be fine if you provide a proper lease to your building, at least in Los Angeles. And, obtaining those permits from the city, paying the transient occupancy tax just like a hotel would, less than 14% for stays less than 30 days. It's really just operating ethically and legally, which has allowed us to scale. And I understand that it's not something that everyone on Airbnb is going to do. I mean, people, especially in economic times like this, are going to, do things that maybe ethics aren't the most important part, and they just want to make a few bucks. I mean, I hear it all the time. People say, "Oh, I'm not going to pay my taxes," or "I'm not going to, get insurance," and it's just, it's tough. And I think that that's partly why the city is really trying to crack down on this type of behavior and regulate it. And if it was regulated, I think that the cities would be happy, guests would be happy, and hosts would be happy as too.
Evan, awesome. Thank you so much for telling your story and talking about your company to all of our guests. If people want to reach out to you or rent a place at Urban Flat, how do they do that?
Yeah, so they can, one, they can search for us on Airbnb. Number two would be to just send us an email, reservations@urbanflat.com. You can also give me a ring, direct 323-999-1611.
Thank you so much. And guys, if you didn't write that down, don't worry. All that information will be in the show notes. You can check out our show notes at getpaidforyourpad.com/podcast. Also, if you want to learn how to be a superhost on Airbnb, you can check out the first 3 chapters of our book at www.getpaidforyourpad.com. Also, you can buy the whole book for $9.97 on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search once again for Get Paid for Your Pad. That's all for today. New episodes are out every Monday and Thursday. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Take it easy.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.